Hi, welcome to Theology Therapist. I am Hannah. Today I want to shift gears and talk just a little bit about meditation. So I recently went on a 7-day silent meditation retreat, and so I wanted to talk to you a little bit about maybe the basics of meditation today. So meditation, what is it? I just want to start with this quote by Jon Kabat-Zinn, who is a famed kind of meditation teacher. He says that mindfulness means paying attention in a particular way, on purpose, in the present moment, non-judgmentally. All of those three things are so simple, like the sort of one-wordness of them, quite simple, but in practice, let me just tell you from my recent experience, not so simple or quite difficult in its simplicity. Mindfulness has just become, or meditation has become, much popular in recent years, and part of that is maybe because of how overworked and burnt out and kind of overstimulated that we are. And so potentially folks are finding solace in mindfulness, in meditation. So why practice it? Well, I find as a therapist, there are lots of reasons why you might practice meditation, but one of those reasons that I find to be most relevant in my work as a therapist and with clients is that meditation creates the space between a stimulus and your reaction, so that your reaction becomes intentional instead of reactionary. Viktor Frankl has this quote. Viktor Frankl was a psychologist in World War II. He was in a concentration camp and he was eventually killed in the concentration camp. But before that happened, he wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning. And this is a quote from that book. So Viktor Frankl says, "Between stimulus and a response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom." So between a stimulus and a response, between your kid like raging because they don't want to go to bed, or between the person that you're dating sending you an unexpected text, or anything, between your boss telling you, like, hey, let's schedule a meeting, we need to talk. So between a stimulus and a response, there is a space. And in that space lies your power to choose your response, right? And these are all things that happen at like a very micro level, like probably right now at a very automatic level. And in choosing your response, he says, lies your growth and your freedom. So when you're not just reacting to whatever is happening around you, you are free to sort of be in the world as you choose to be, as you'd like to be. You may wonder, especially given a lot of the things that we've talked about here in this space, is about its connection to religion. Is meditation religious? It does derive from a Buddhist and Hindu lineages. There are different forms and types of meditation. But in the West, you can often find a type of meditation that is sort of quite essentially secular. For example, you could learn what the five precepts and the Four Noble Truths are in Buddhist philosophy, or you could go take a mindfulness-based cognitive, sort of therapy program, or a mindfulness-based stress reduction program at MIT or MGH, and kind of have that philosophical touch likely left out of it. Okay, some considerations, some things that I've heard over the years as a clinician as to why some mental health conditions that could be contraindicated, right? So they may say, like, the biggest one is, I have ADD or I have ADHD, so I can't meditate. So something like ADHD can be seen on brain scans, right? Like the surface of the brain changes, as opposed to a brain that doesn't have that. And I think that because we are, as a society, so, with phones and technology and whatever it is, we're TVs, like whatever, we are so overstimulated that it's become really popular and really normal for just about everybody to, sort of have ADD or have ADHD. And that's not to minimize anyone's experience, but to also just sort of nuance a little bit. I would say like the clinical difference between what happens in a brain and in like sort of adapting to overstimulation, right? So the great thing about brains that we are learning more and more about each year is that we can grow new neural pathways. We can retrain our brains. And so when someone talks to me about not meditating or not believing that they can because of either a diagnosis or a predisposition for ADHD or ADHD or just difficulty with attention, I like to remind that what we are learning more and more is that our brains can be reconditioned, that we can grow new neural pathways. And so this means that it could for you too. The other thing that I would ask is, for anybody, is what's your purpose? Like, what's your why? Why would you start meditating? And one of my teachers at this meditation retreat that I went to, she said that she used to believe that she was meditating for like wisdom, to cultivate wisdom or something like that. But she had a teacher that sort of said something to the effect of like, we don't actually know what we're meditating for, like the reason, like we don't know what's going to come that is going to present the opportunity for like in which to use the meditation or the skills or the, whatever the benefits of the meditation. And so we don't know like what the meditation is for necessarily. I can want to initially cultivate wisdom, but what may happen over time is something totally different. Good or bad, here nor there, but something to kind of think about. What is your why? Why would you want to do this? Why would you want to commit to this? Why is this important to you? The other thing, and the most important thing, if you have never meditated before, or if it is something that would be difficult for you, is to start slow and to start achievable. A lot of times I have these conversations with folks who, say I've never meditated or I can't because I have ADD or whatever. And they say, I can't do 20 minutes. I'm like, well, of course. So what I recommend is if you are wanting to start this habit, that you start with 3 minutes. 3 minutes, that's all. 3 minutes. You set the timer, and so you don't have to think, you don't have to look at the clock, the timer's gonna go off. You set the timer. I'll talk about both of these things more next week, but the other thing that I recommend is giving yourself a point of focus. So a lot of times we think that we just have to like sit there, eyes closed like this and for like 20 minutes and then what? Like, what do we do, right? So you can open your eyes, and so I find that it can be really helpful to give a point of focus, right? So sometimes for me, I name my plants, and so I have my office plant. His name is Dante. He's not in here today, but he also doesn't love the office very much. It's not like direct sunlight, so we're trying to work that out. But sometimes in my meditation, Dante will be my point of focus, and so I will use him to place my attention on when it feels like it's kind of running wild. The other mental health issue that somebody may ask about, like, well, can I meditate if I've had trauma? And this is a really great question, because what has happened after a traumatic experience is that the body sometimes can get co-opted. So the body ends up reactive, tense, on edge, whenever there may or may not be an actual threat. What happens is the body doesn't actually feel safe or like home anymore. And so the idea of closing your eyes can be really activating. Or the direction to connect with your breath, that can be really activating. Or even the direction to investigate your emotions, right? Like those can just be things that feel like if you do that it's gonna like sort of spiral out of control. I mention those things because those are things that are like often, almost always said, especially at the beginning of a meditation. And if you have had that experience where trauma is still sort of situated in your body, that can sort of be immediately off-putting. So if you would like to try meditation, my recommendation is to widen your field of awareness. What that means is, or what that is going to look like, is that you are going to open your eyes when you feel that you are sort of starting to activate, starting to feel that sort of panic rise. You're going to open your eyes. Take in the room, connect with any or as many of your senses as you can, and ground into your body. So, you know, if I'm looking around in the room, I might say like, okay, lamp, picture, pens, router, curtains. You know, I might like hear like clock ticking. If somebody was cooking, I might sort of like notice those smells, right? Like, so I'm gonna kind of like really connect with all of those things. I might like connect with the feeling of like this chair and the fabric, or like my jeans, like connecting with as many senses as you can. And then a great anchor, so a great direction instead of your breath, is to connect with your feet or your hands, right? Like you could even, there's no like sort of better or worse or reasoning. You could connect, like you could move your attention to like your elbows, right? Or whatever. But your feet, they can be like a really great anchor point if breath feels activating. The last thing is that if trauma is really reactive, if it's still disruptive to your daily life, then I do recommend seeking professional help. Okay, so why talk about meditation here? How can it help your mental health? Well, first thing is that meditation has the power to bring a sense of calm into chaos, to bring intentionality instead of reactivity, and to connect to your body in a disembodied world. It actually isn't easy, but it is such a great microcosm for the patterns in life itself, right? So if we're wanting to practice, you know, like not being snappy with a partner or with our friends or our boss, meditation is a great place to practice that before you get into those interactions. So if you've never tried it before, I recommend that you give it a try. Come back next week because I will be sharing some simple practices, some tips and tricks for getting started. So make sure that you hit that red subscribe button so that you get a notification when next week's video comes out so that you can start practicing this right away. Thanks for being here. See you next time.